Hey guys, what is up and welcome to a new Tesla update video. So today, as per usual, let's go over Tesla stock, let's go over the market, let's talk about what happened today on a bit of a, kind of a volatile day for the most part intraday. Today was of course the final day of the quarter and the month, right? So there was a lot of rebalancing happening on around the market, but Tesla holding up, decently well, all things considered, up 0.34%, which is not that bad considering it was down a decent amount more at the lowest point of the day. So what does this mean moving forward? Let's talk about it. Obviously, it's worth noting that delivery numbers are coming out Thursday morning, so it's kind of like a mini earnings. So always, important to understand that that's coming up, right? It's who knows how that's going to go and how the market will react. But let's take a look and see what we can figure out going into the print and potentially after. So again, if you enjoyed, don't forget to hit that like button. It's not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. And of course, I do have a YouTube private membership section where, again, I share all my thoughts, post updates, technical analysis, options flow every day as the market is open. So definitely check that out. That's the first link in the description of the video. You can click that to join for just $3 a month. Includes all my Tesla updates, options flow, technical analysis, different time frames, and broader market updates as well. $5 in adds NVDA to that. $7 adds pretty much every other stock that I talk about in the market that's setting up something nice, I guess you can say, something worth potentially trading. And you get access to the private Discord, chat room, and weekend chart requests with members on Discord as well. But yeah, jumping into it, Tesla, like I said, 0.34%. So what does this actually mean moving forward, right? Well, Tesla's in a peculiar spot, right? The 50-minute was kind of up and down, right? We fell below this level. Then you can see at the second we turned this sort of 440 region into resistance, right? We fell below, we turned into resistance, made another low, but then we ended up actually breaking out, right? We broke out of this kind of downward trend line, and then the second we broke out of this downward trend line, we rocketed back up to pretty much 444 and 445 roughly once again, right? So we're back at this very, very crucial level here. Now, I'm gonna go back to the 1 hour time frame, right? The 1 hour time frame is where I'll give us a bit of a different POV, but you can also see on the 1 hour, kind of the same idea, right? Broke past this kind of, trend line resistance and bam, we rocketed up pretty nicely, right? So pretty good stuff. But nonetheless, right, zooming out on the 1 hour, this is where it's kind of like a slightly bigger picture, if you will, right? You can absolutely make an argument that Tesla is in a bit of a rising triangle type pattern. Now you can see, we've been making essentially these higher lows on this situation. This is actually the exact same pattern that Tesla was in back when it was, if I go back on the daily, over here, right? Remember this whole situation here where we were also arguably in a rising triangle pattern, pretty much making roughly equal highs almost, but constantly making these higher lows, right? Same thing, just obviously substantially smaller, but nonetheless. So worth mentioning and watching for this to potentially play out. However, we haven't broken out yet, right? Similar to back then on the daily chart, right? When we were in the 330s and whatnot, Tesla does need to break above, 444, 445, right? That is that sort of level to break and ideally hold, right? That's the most important thing because we technically did break that out. I think, what was this, yesterday, right? But you can see, at least in the 1 hour time frame, again, the higher the time frame, the higher, validity, I guess, if you will, behind candle closures. Like a 1 minute candle closing above 445 is not the same as a 15, not the same as a 1 hour, not the same as a daily, weekly, etc., right? The higher the time frame, the slower it'll be, the longer it'll take to get any confirmation, of course, but it's also, you're rewarded for that patience potentially because the higher time frames are stronger, if that makes sense, right? Again, a 1 hour candle above here is better than a 1 minute, right? For instance. But nonetheless, we failed to do that yesterday, right? We ended up getting swept down below, ended up coming back down fairly low. Well, not fairly low, but 430s almost. I mentioned 430s quite some time. We went to 433.24. So we got pretty close, right? Which is where that daily 9 EMA is sitting. You can see we got, only a couple of dollars off of it, which is, fine. But we need to break above this, guys. We need to break above this level. This level needs to snap and, more importantly, hold, right? Break above, hold, and then turn into support, right? And then I think we'll see 455, which is that sort of gap fill, which is the gap fill from all the way here on the left on Tesla stock. If I go over here, you can see this little gap fill that we set back here around that 454-ish region. Now, if we reject from here, right, obviously there's the risk of the whole government shutdown noise tonight. Is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? Who knows? Is the market going to react positively or negatively? Who knows, right? We don't obviously, have any, real idea as to how it's going to go, right? It's anyone's guess. But assuming we react negatively, let's say assuming Tesla does, sell off, or maybe, the market sells off, whatever, it doesn't matter, right? But let's just say we do reject from here because you can see a very obvious level of rejection here, right? Constant rejection, constant issues getting back above. So worth noting that if we do get a rejection, to me, the worst case scenario that I see for Tesla stock short-ish term, while still maintaining this kind of, short-ish, I guess, if you will, bullish mindset, essentially, again, pretty much within this, rising triangle pattern on the 1 hour time frame is a sell-off. Well, back to that trend line, right? Back to that trend line down here. Again, pretty much closer to actually 430. We got pretty close to it today, right? But not quite there. So, an actual test of the 430-ish region, actual test closer to that 9 EMA once again. But again, we have a lot of support down here, right? We have this trend line, we have the daily 9 EMA. So there is a lot of support if we, of course, sell off back down to about, closer to 430 itself, which would be a sell-off of about almost 3 percentiles. So that to me right now, in my opinion, is the kind of the worst case scenario while maintaining that bullish bias still, right? Obviously, if we lose this level, if we fall below this trend line, then we obviously sell off even more. And I think we come down to this larger trend line that I'll show on the daily very soon, which will be a sell off closer to $400 per share, which obviously from here will be a decent amount lower. That's almost about a 10 to 11% drop, right? Which for Tesla is not that much. It's a pretty volatile stock, but worth understanding and knowing that, if we lose that range, then that's probably where we're going next. So let's continue monitoring this, day by day, guys, and how it continues to overall develop, right? Now that trend line I was mentioning to the downside, if we actually do lose this kind of smaller rising triangle pattern, essentially below a very high 420s, honestly. The 21 EMA roughly sitting around 400 right now, and that's where this larger trend line, you can see this larger trend line right over here, where we started it from down here, nice little touch points over here, massive push up to the upside. And of course, if this situation fails, if maybe we get a nice push to 455, then that ends up being a rejection to move downwards, whatever the case may be, right? This would be the next level to the downside I'll be watching for at some point, maybe post delivery numbers, who knows, right? But that'll be that level to the downside if we do get that sell off further and lower. But again, I want to make something very clear. These shorter term timeframes I'm looking at, like the 1 hour here, the break to 455 as the first level. Obviously above that, if we break above 455, the next level will be 465, followed by pretty much retesting all-time highs in the 480s. But these are all shorter term games, right? And I still do want to, at the very least, warrant some level of caution because, despite the daily is still not looking too bad, right? We have the 9 EMA supporting price, things are looking good. It's worth noting that the weekly, obviously the weekly is much slower, right? It'll take, a lot more time for this to play out. Like for instance, easily a month potentially, right? But it's worth noting that the weekly is extended, right? It's not, it is what it is. Again, the 9 weekly exponential moving average, it's a pretty aggressive moving average. And again, if you just look back in the history of Tesla stock, whenever it does move away too far away, unless this is one of those times where Tesla just gets a parabolic move to the upside, but even during most of those parabolic moves, you can see, for instance, when Tesla really had its initial surge, look at this on the weekly, right? Let's take a quick peek over here. This is when Tesla was just going from like double digits into the triple digits, right? You can see broke out of this nice little situation here, tested out support, and then it had a massive move up, right, for 3 weeks. And then you can see the third week, it gave most of it back, and then it slowly consolidated to the 9 weekly EMA. Bounced off of it, 9 weekly EMA, bounced off of it, 9 weekly EMA, set up a nice little pennant here, and then headed higher. But this was, of course, when it really squeezed. This was like, those rare instances where it just goes parabolic as heck, where, it's still not that far away. But you can see, even on these candles here, the low of the, candles on the weekly here wasn't too far away from the weekly, right? If we take a look from the lowest point to the weekly going downwards, about maybe 6%, right? Not that crazy. But you can see as it got a close on the weekly all the way up here, it didn't come back right away, but it didn't really go anywhere. And ultimately, what did it do? It just went sideways and then came back to the 9 weekly, which at that point obviously broke down, whatever. But hopefully that makes sense, right? Same idea here, right? You can see for the most part it stayed pretty close to it, and then it went parabolic, right? But this was many this was almost a year after, right? Parabolic, it did go parabolic, and then after it got too far away from the 9 weekly, came back to it, right? It's the same thing every time. Right now, it just depends on how quickly it happens. Maybe it does get an extra push up to the upside, which ended up just being a massive bull trap. It's worth understanding. But even on those very parabolic time frames, it still doesn't usually get too far away. And right now, even if we go from the lowest point of the candle down to the weekly 9 EMA, we're like 10% above it, right? So that's just kind of my, there are short-term games. We do have still some short-term momentum building up. We can potentially go a little bit higher, but it's just worth noting and understanding that the weekly is extended. It is what it is. And to me, it just means the fact that if we get any short-term games up here, again, it's short-term. This is, if I'm playing this, I'm probably taking, in and out, I'm taking profits, probably fairly quickly because the risk reward to me personally up here, like I just showed you in previous examples, isn't the best in the entire world when the weekly is this far away from it, right? So it just, again, different time frames signal different things, of course, but it's worth understanding and mentioning, at least in my opinion. So again, do with that information what you will. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not telling you what to do, obviously. But for me personally, the risk up here on a longer time frame is high. Each to their own, of course. Going over to SPY, right? So what is SPY giving us, right? So SPY on the daily time frame, it's not looking too bad, right? It's not looking. I'll go over options at the end, of course, but on SPY on the daily time frame here, it's not looking too bad. So breaking out of this nice triangle pattern right here, you can see the descending trend line broke above it, which is good to see, and so far it's holding pretty nicely above it as well. So let's see what that actually develops into as well. But the market's still above EMA's, above the trend line, and looking pretty good. Options flow. Very bullish options flow towards the end of the day. Tesla looking pretty damn good. So yeah, the bulls are stepping in. They want to play these short-term games. Let's see what develops into. Let's see what they can actually make this into. But again, the delivery numbers Thursday worth mentioning. But all in all, thanks for watching. See you tomorrow. Peace.